Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my Ask an Angel series. This is my favorite part, talking to one of my portfolio companies' founders and going over their whole journey. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Andrew Wyatt from CALA. He's the founder and CEO. Thank you for doing this,
Hey,
Andrew.
Jonathan. How's it going?
It's going good, buddy. Keep it busy as usual. Not as busy as you, I'm sure.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad we have a chance to sit down and catch up.
Yeah, definitely. So, to give the viewers some background, love to hear about CALA, when it was founded, and what made you come up with the idea of the company.
Awesome. So hard to believe, but May 12th, 2016 is when CALA was
Yeah.
founded. Seems like forever ago now. So been at it about 5.5 years. And really, it came from my experience at Ship, which was a startup based in SF. And I was the first employee there, head of operations. And it was like Uber for shipping.
Mhm.
And what we quickly realized is that the business model and the use case around an individual need to ship something was, infrequent at best. However,
Right.
there was businesses that were using Ship every day to, fulfill orders to a broader audience or to fulfill, Amazon orders or Shopify orders or Etsy orders. And so that kind of got my wheels turning around. In the future, there's going to be all these great platforms that make it easy to be an entrepreneur, make it easy to run your own business. And you hear a lot about them on the, you know, payment side or social media, which is great for marketing, or, there's a lot of different things related to making the sale and connecting with the audience, email, Klaviyo, MailChimp. But I
Yeah.
hadn't really seen much on the supply chain side. And so,
Right.
I'm thinking, I'm like, well, when Ship was being used by all these people, they're like, oh, great, now I don't have to worry about this nightmare of packing boxes and shipping to customers and returns and things like that. And so I was thinking like a
Hmm.
step further is like, well, how do these people actually make the great products that they want to sell using Shopify and these platforms?
Right.
And so that's kind of what got the gears turning there. We've been through, several iterations. I think one of the things that we do best is listening to our customers on,
Hmm.
maybe we have a great idea about on-demand production of 3D custom fit stuff, but their real need is actually not solving the problem of returns, but instead just getting the product they want. And so that's kind of where we evolve now. We're basically CALA is the first operating system for fashion and really bring together everything that you need from ghost
Hmm.
design, manufacturing, technical design, fulfillment, customer support into one interface so you can manage your business, on the road or at your office.
Yeah. Wonderful. And along those lines, I think the word about pivoting, right? Like when you're a startup founder, you pivot all the time. What would you say? Because I remember when you first pitched me this idea, it was about perfect fit. And now I've seen like 20, 30 different companies. And and I always send you those companies like, hey, is this doing something different than what we thought about like back in 2016? No. And so it's like, how do you know when it was right time to pivot for Cala? What made you decide, okay, we got to be the operating system versus the measurement supply chain system?
So I think, and you probably know this better than me as an angel investor, it's always like idea, team, and timing. And I think that initially we had an idea, but I think the timing was off. And you could argue
Mhm.
we didn't quite have the right team as far as doing, advanced AR. And this is back before, the iPhone had these amazing PrimeSense cameras built in. And so,
Mhm.
we were doing a lot of really interesting stuff, but the timing wasn't quite right. And I even
Right.
think the timing's still not right. I think what we learned after a year or so of working on that is that, the customers are still, they want the least friction possible in the checkout experience. And so having
Right.
to even, take a couple photos of yourself, some people are super into it, but the average
Right.
person, they want 2 clicks and, or even, 1 click to buy on Amazon. So I think what you have to do is find like the unfortunate thing for founders, I think, is early, it's very hard to get great feedback. So, your friends and your friends' friends and your early customers, everyone's like, oh my gosh, I love this. So cool. You're
Yeah.
doing your own business. Wow, this is a great idea. And like probably a lot of them go home and are like, oh geez, that's never gonna work. But
Yeah.
so what you have to try and do is like how do you as early as possible get real feedback? And maybe it's an
Correct.
anonymous survey, maybe it's just a mentor and advisor that's just going to shoot super straight
Hmm.
with you. But that's
Hmm.
super important. And it's kind of finding the balance between, there's going to be a lot of people that tell you can't do something, but you have to find like who are those people that you trust that they're actually going to give you that good feedback, and finding the balance between like not giving up an idea too early, but
Right.
knowing when it's time to pivot and time to try a new direction. And what we've kind of found over and over again is the best is like when your biggest customer or your biggest, best cohort of customers is telling you something over and
Mhm.
over again, that's typically a good indicator that, if not for anything else, you need to kind of water that a little bit and see what's going on. But a lot of times they're telling you specifically what you need to build.
Yeah. And honestly, when I tell everybody too, like I agree with you, ideas important, but like the team is so much important. And when I made this investment, I loved who you are as a CEO and founder, and it was the key. And I'd love to hear about how you built your team. Of course, I know Dylan, your CTO and co-founder, but obviously it's more than two of you guys now, and your girlfriend's setting up shop in Los Angeles Convention Center. That was a long time ago. Love to hear like how'd you build the team, who the key players are now, and what you need going forward.
Absolutely. So we're now about 25 people. So pretty amazing. Has come a long way. And
Mm-hmm.
what we've done is we very intentionally, so I hate to call us this, but we're a technology company in the fashion space. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I've always believed is super important is to have a good balance of technology experts, but also experts from fashion. And
Mm-hmm.
if you lean too far in one of those directions, you're going to end up building a product that's too, you know, for the wrong customer potentially, or at least skewed by people's preferences or understanding or experience. And so what we've done is basically, on one side of the house, our head of product, Ryan, he was the founding product designer at Superhuman, which is one of the
Mm-hmm.
top productivity
Yep.
apps. And obviously, if
Yep.
you're running a supply chain, productivity super important. Um, and he's an incredible designer, great UX designer. And then on our operating side or our fashion side, our head of operations, Lauren, she came from Alexander Wang, where she was the director of materials for 3 years. And then before that, she helped Kanye start Yeezy, and did Yeezy season 1 through 4. And so
Mm-hmm.
that combination of those two folks, and obviously we have a ton of amazing other people across, all different organizations. But I think when you think about like who are the people that are driving the business forward, and then who are the people that are hiring on your behalf, almost like once you get a layer in there and then they're starting to hire, it's so critical that you get that first sort of group of people to be the right fit based on the type of product you're trying to build.
Got it. Wonderful. And what would you say you're doing differently than your competitors, or who are your competitors? Or are you really just like the leader right now? Because everyone was doing perfect fit modeling, right? And like trying to lower, the problem with Amazon is like, hey, there was too many deliveries. These people are buying more than one size just to figure out what the perfect fit was. I see a bunch of people in that industry, but now who would you say you go against for CALA? Is it just traditional retail and brands, or is it really just, next other operating systems out there for the fashion world?
So there's kind of the traditional players, like the PLM systems is a word that you'll hear a lot in fashion, which stands for product lifecycle management. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
an ERP system for fashion. Um, and almost all of them are incredibly heavyweight legacy tools that everyone hates actually using. It looks like SAP. It's not, it's built with the CFO in mind. It's not built with
Right.
the end user in mind. And
Yeah.
I don't want to rag on these products. Like they're super important, especially if you're a billion-dollar company, to understand, what's actually happening.
What
We've
the
kind of
trends are. Yeah.
taken exactly. We've kind of, looked at those tools from a functionality perspective, but those don't really solve, if you're thinking through the lens of like kind of like middle-sized brands, you can get a big
Mm-hmm.
PLM system, $1 million implementation, super expensive, very heavyweight, but then you have to go find all of your own factories. You have to do all of your own technical design. You have to set up the architecture yourself. And so it's a very, very heavyweight system. And it just doesn't make sense for even like decent sized brands don't yet have a PLM system. I won't name any names there.
Hmm.
And so what our kind of approach is like, what if the technology was built purpose based for the ease of taking a product idea and bringing it to life? Yes, having a PLM type system that helps, with communications helpful, but what if it also had a network of, 50 factories that were onboarded to the platform that could bid on your project in real time? Then not only are you getting this great tool for communication, but you're actually, we're optimizing for the outcome of great products that are, at a fulfillment center. And then of course we realized like, well, sending the products to your office is not that helpful. And so now we've added a fulfillment network as well. And so, really you can come up with this idea on your phone or on your computer, upload a few comments, get pricing instantly, and then push a button and it's, in progress. And you can work directly with the factory and the technical designers and the 3PL partners to get that, ready to sell to your customers.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question about fundraising. Every entrepreneur's favorite subject. Not really, because you really want to have time to run the business and grow. But always funding is always a concern. How would you say you found your investors, and who's the ideal best investor for someone like CALA and yourself?
So fundraising is definitely, for me, has been the hardest part of the whole experience. And it's definitely, I've heard people say always be fundraising, or fundraising never stops. And really it's true. No matter if you just raised a big round or not, you're always kind of thinking about, what do we have to do to get to that next round? What do we have to do? Who do we have to hire now? What happens if we can't raise then? What do we do? What's our backup plan? God forbid there's some sort of act of God or force majeure or something, like, how do we
Hmm.
make sure it's not just game over? And so those are things that kind of constantly run in your head always. And
Hmm.
so for me, it's kind of, I think there's two kind of things that are super important. One is someone that believes in the idea, and more importantly, as you alluded to earlier, someone that believes in you. And
Hmm.
so, a lot of investors, especially experienced investors, understand that, whatever's in that initial deck is potentially going to be
Yep.
broadly different from where it eventually ends up. But
Absolutely.
they are investing in the fact that you're the person who's going to figure it out, no matter what,
Hmm.
thick or thin, whether it's the business idea or it's getting additional capital in the company, or whether it's, making the call that it's time to hang it up. And so I think, finding an investor that believes in you is super important. Is going to support, since you're spending 120% of your, bandwidth on this, support your decisions, give great feedback, but support your decisions. So I think
Right.
that's super important. And then I think like one of the other things that I've found just over the course, of this experience that's super important is to understand what is your investors network as well for
Hmm.
like up the chain funding. So, even a small check, $1,000,
Hmm.
$5,000 from an angel that is, tightly networked with seed funds, that might be the best $1,000 that you've ever taken in, even if it's not at a, on a 5 million cap or something safe note. So I think it's also important to kind of try to be
Hmm.
thinking a few rounds ahead, even as far as the relationships that you're building, and who those investors are, and how they could potentially, lead to warm intros in the future.
Got it. Great. And what has been your experience versus not angel investors? Because that's different. Like, because I tell people, when you sold this to me, obviously what the company is today, what it was then is not the same. But you sold, like I said, I bet on you as a person, and you sold me the sizzle, right? And now, like, now we have to know if the steak tastes good. So, when you're raising your seed versus your Series A, what would you say are the big differences? Like, was it just the numbers, or was it just like just getting in front of enough people and just finding people who believe in your idea and giving you the time and money to execute? What would you say was the differences between now fundraising for your seed versus like Series A and above?
Yeah, so I think for the seed round, it really is more seeing some early traction on the idea, and even really
Mm-hmm.
these days, it's far more intense than it was back in the ship days. Back in the ship days, we had a little web app, like nowhere near to a full product, and we're able to raise the seed. now, investors want to see dramatically more progress for the seed round. And
Yeah.
I think that's why you're seeing pre-seed and a lot of different
Yep.
sort of like angel round tranches, because you really need to have, a product in the market with users to be able to raise a decent seed these days. And then I
Right.
think going from seed to A is really proving out not only do you have product market fit, but do you have reliable data around how you're going to acquire customers, what the cost to
Mm-hmm.
acquire customers is, how big is that market, and so I think that now, once again, relative to the heydays in SF back in 2013,
Yeah.
2015, the amount of data and things you have proven out need to be substantially more built out going into the A for sure.
Mm-hmm. Great. Wonderful. And from your experience, before you were like the first employee at Shipped, right? And obviously they went through their turmoil, and unfortunately it didn't work out for them. Like from your experience, like, and you're still in it, you're still doing great. What would your advice be to someone who wants to start off nowadays? Trying to bring their vision to life. It's a little bit different. I mean, it seems like the economy's still going great, but we'll see. We'll see. Each day is we're getting to, I don't know if we're in the eighth inning, of the ball game for this run, but if it's still the eighth, then that means still not over.
Absolutely. I think there's so much capital, whether it's in, public, private, crypto,
Mm-hmm.
that it's once again going back to the team and the idea. I think that
Mm-hmm.
if it's a good team and a good idea, then there's a little bit less risk around the timing, especially if you get some good investors in and a decent amount of cash now. I would say definitely raise more than you think that you need, especially right
Mm-hmm.
now, just so that if you do need to pivot once, you're not out trying to raise in the middle of a downturn or something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think like when it comes to the idea itself, I think I'm seeing more and more businesses that are successful by bootstrapping it or trying to get an MVP up before they even really
Mm-hmm.
like go out and start having initial conversations, which I know is super
Mm-hmm.
hard for 99% of people. But I think even just the effort of like, hey, I had to work a full-time job because I'm married and have a kid, but in the meantime, I built this product and I have this number of users, and it's not, anything crazy right now, but I know that this works and I validate it with the customers. Any like that hustle is what I think, your kind of your first angel investors, your first maybe like, pre-seed fund are going to want to see. I think like, at least from my experience, if you're a first time founder,
Mm-hmm.
raising off of just a deck is a kind of an unrealistic
Mm-hmm.
thing to do, unless you went to Stanford or Harvard or you worked at Google or Uber or one of these top companies. I think that if you're kind of in like the 99%, you have to show something in excess of just having a good idea, because then it's all about like the execution risk, and they're asking
Mm-hmm.
themselves like, well, this random person who went to University of Tennessee, like how do I have confidence around the fact that they're going to be able to actually like turn this deck into a real thing? So I think whatever you can
Right.
do to kind of prove it out, and the beauty of it, going back to kind of like the initial like ship
Mm-hmm.
to CALA thing, is that
Yeah.
there's amazing tools out there now, like Webflow,
Mm-hmm.
incredible. You can build yourself can build an absolutely beautiful top tier website in like
Mm-hmm.
a relatively finite amount of time. You can tie together Airtable to create sort of like a back end type system, and actually create database type stuff that you can push data into. Zapier, you can connect a million different
Mm-hmm.
apps together, so you can almost hack your way to what feels, from a sort of a non-tech user, it can feel like a product
Right.
experience, despite the fact being something where you haven't written a single line of code. And so I think that for coming up with ideas, it's really not a good excuse to say, oh well, I didn't have enough money to hire an engineer yet, so I don't have any
Right.
product. Like,
Right.
or
Right.
just using Vision to like, create, or Figma to create what that kind of like user
Mm-hmm.
fluid experience is, something that gives people that understanding of like, oh, okay, this is not just flat screens on a deck. This is like an
Mm-hmm.
actual experience that's been thought through and has intricacies. I think that's what can give people more confidence to write the first check.